welcome. We are glad to have you with us today. We'll give just a few minutes for everyone to roll in. This is our monthly Mental Health Matters, which we have now this year moved to the first Friday of every month. This month, we are going to be talking about social anxiety disorder, more than just shy. A lot of us who do this work are introverts, and we want to talk about what it means to be shy and what it means to be something more serious with social anxiety disorder. Again, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us. This is our Mental Health Matters Forum, and today we are talking about social anxiety disorder. We are SC Thrive, a nonprofit organization that helps to lead South Carolinians to stability by providing innovative and efficient access to quality of life resources. Basically, we help meet people where they are and help take them to where they want to be or need to be. So we offer a wide range of services for South Carolinians. Today, we are very happy to have Nora Sinclair with us from Nora Sinclair Counseling. Welcome, Nora.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for having me.
She is an anxiety specialist. And Nora, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I am a licensed professional counselor in Lexington, South Carolina. My specialty is treating people who have anxiety disorders and OCD, and that includes social anxiety disorder. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, and I'm trained in exposure and response prevention. These are called evidence-based treatments because they are backed by clinical research, which says they're effective for treating anxiety disorders. In addition to being a counselor, I'm also a person who's struggled with social anxiety. So this topic today is doubly important to me.
Awesome. Well, we are so glad that you could join us today. As we go through, we'll be asking Nora some questions, and you also have the opportunity, if you hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little talk bubble like you see in a cartoon strip that's a chat. And if you have a question or something you would like to contribute to the conversation, we'd love for you to put that in the chat, and we will address that as we come across it. So anxiety is a normal emotional reaction to stress, and it's an important part of living. It can help us to get out of harm's way, prepare for important events. It can warn us when we need to take action. Everyone can relate to feeling anxious before giving a presentation, even just a little bit. Asking someone out on a date, going for a job interview. You get those butterflies in your stomach, your sweaty palms, sometimes your heart races a little bit. And all of these are normal feelings in a new situation or a new or intimidating social situation. But for approximately 15 million American adults, social anxiety disorder causes extreme self-consciousness in everyday social or performance situations and becomes an intense, persistent, excessive, and irrational fear of being watched, judged, embarrassing themselves, or humiliating themselves. It can seem uncontrollable, overwhelming, and disabling. It is the most second commonly diagnosed anxiety disorder in the United States. The anxiety and discomfort often becomes so extreme that it can interfere with daily functioning at work, at school, or other normal day-to-day activities. It can even make it hard to make and keep friends or romantic partners. The disorder can disrupt family life, reduce self-esteem, and limit work efficiency. It may leave people feeling powerless or alone and even ashamed. The good news is, though, while it can be a debilitating disorder, it is important to know that with appropriate treatment, recovery is possible. Nora, what are some of the common myths or misperceptions about social anxiety disorder?
Well, I think one of the main ones is that social anxiety disorder is the same as introversion. And this isn't true for a couple of reasons. First of all, introversion and extroversion have more to do with how you process stimuli and how you recharge. So extroverts want stimulation, and that often involves getting stimulation from other people, from conversations and activities. Introverts like to minimize how much stimulus they get. And so that can result in not being around people. Another reason this is not true that introversion is the same as social anxiety is because introverts and extroverts can both get social anxiety and have social anxiety disorder. Also, I think that for people who don't have social anxiety, it can be hard to understand how debilitating it is, that it can lead a person to really isolate, to not pursue life activities that they are interested in, but and maybe really, really want to do, but they're terrified to do them. So it's not the case that a person with social anxiety doesn't want to be social. Oftentimes they very badly want to be social. It's just so frightening for them.
That's good. And like you had mentioned, extroverts can also have social anxiety disorder, and I think that that's not even on our radar, that a person who is extroverted could have social anxiety disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. And there's reasons for that. We can talk about that as we go.
Yeah. Unfortunately, social anxiety disorder is, like you said, often just dismissed as extreme shyness or introversion. And the reason that many people don't seek help for social anxiety disorder is that they don't even realize that they have what could be a recognized psychiatric condition. Statistics show that although symptoms usually start in childhood, only about 50% of adults with the disorder receive treatment. And those who do seek treatment wait a long time to do so, often as many as 15 years after the symptoms begin. Without treatment, anxiety disorder, can sometimes last for many years or even a lifetime, and it can prevent a person from reaching their full potential. With treatment and self-help strategies, an individual can learn coping strategies and overcome their disorder to lead a successful life. In fact, studies show that nearly 70% of individuals who suffer from social anxiety disorder may well be successfully treated with cognitive therapy. Most people who do seek treatment from the disorder see significant improvement and enjoy a much better quality of life. The main differences between shyness and social anxiety disorder include the impairment of a person's functioning that it causes in a person's life, the intensity of the level of fear, and the level of avoidance. Nora, how can you best help a friend or a loved one who you believe may have social anxiety disorder?
Well, I think it's really important to start from a place of empathy, to let this person know that you realize it's hard for them and that social anxiety is real. Many people don't seek help for mental health issues because they feel misunderstood and because they feel stigmatized. So being supportive means putting yourself in their place. Also, don't push them to be social. Dragging somebody out and saying it's no big deal, just get over it, is not helpful. If somebody really has social anxiety disorder, we use more graduated exposures to help with that. And so encouraging this person to find professional help through counseling, to look online. There's lots of resources. There are many workbooks that have been published which take you step by step. And there are also support groups for people who have social anxiety disorder. Some of those are in person and some of those are virtual.
Awesome. And what about from a parenting perspective? How can you best help a child or an adolescent who you believe may be suffering from social anxiety disorder?
Well, similar to a friend, you want to recognize that this is hard for your child. They're not just being difficult about going to school or difficult about being left alone at a birthday party when they really want you to stay. And to have that empathy for your child, but also to not fall into the trap of helping them avoid anxiety, because the more you avoid it, the stronger, more powerful it gets. And that's a fine line to walk. So there are great books out there for parents. There's also good resources on childmind.org. And finally, there is a parent-based treatment called SPACE. It's I just forgot what the acronym stands for, but it's basically supporting parents who have anxious children. And in that, we work with the parent rather than the child to see how is the parent accommodating anxiety, what can the parent do in their control to change and support the child. And that results in behavior change for the child. Without the child ever having to go to therapy, him or herself, which often children do not want to do.
Awesome. And if you got our email invitation to this, there was a link to that SPACE treatment website. So that's something that you can explore back if you want to revisit that email. You talked about the spiral and the cycle of anxiety. So let's just take a look here with the triggering social situation. And then the person evaluates. If they decide this is safe, then there's no anxiety. It's good. But if they decide that the situation is dangerous to them in some way personally, it activates that fight or flight response, which then initiates the physiological symptoms of anxiety, which causes the behavioral symptoms, the avoidance, the escape, the safety behaviors, which then reinforces that this was a dangerous situation. And then that starts that cycle all over again. Can you just touch upon a little bit about that?
Yes, well, this is based in how humans learn, and that goes into learning theory, but it also demonstrates the importance of cognition, of our thoughts when it comes to how we feel. So up at the top there, you can take the same social situation, have 100 people in it, and look at what they're thinking about it. The ones who are thinking this is safe, this is comfortable, this is fun, I've got this under control, they're not going to perceive danger. And so that's not going to trigger that fight or flight response that we are all hardwired to have. People who are thinking, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. What if I do something and people judge me? Because social anxiety is very much about being afraid of being judged in front of other people or by other people. And so you start kicking off this fight or flight response. A lot of times people are worried that others will notice these physiological symptoms they have. They'll notice the sweating, they'll notice the blushing, or that they're kind of spacey or not maybe attending to things. And the person with social anxiety sees that as a threat as well, because of course, if somebody notices this about you, they must be thinking it's a negative thing, and it just kind of spirals from there. When you avoid situations, you never give yourself a chance to learn that your assumptions about the situation were inaccurate. When you escape a situation at the height of feeling anxious, you also don't give yourself a chance to learn that anxiety actually comes down on its own. It does not stay up at the high range forever. Doing nothing, anxiety will drop on its own. And some of the safety behaviors people might do are things like not making eye contact, sitting in a corner, planning to leave early, planning to come late. Those things also take away from your experience of seeing that this situation, objectively speaking, is not the danger that your brain is telling you it is.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for speaking to that and seeing how it kind of perpetuates itself from one situation to the next. Scientific research suggests that there are biological, genetic, and environmental factors that all contribute to risk factors. The disorder usually begins around age 13, but younger children can also suffer. Younger children who may be suffering could cry, cling, fail to speak in social situations with other children. it's important to note that children and teens don't simply grow out of this disorder, as many people believe that they do. If signs and symptoms persist, it's important to get a diagnosis. Nora, what are some of those risk factors that are involved?
Well, you mentioned nature and nurture, and the analogous terms for that are biological and learning. The biological factors are mostly genetic factors. Anxiety runs in families. And so if you have a first degree relative, a close relative who has an anxiety disorder or even another mental health disorder, you are genetically more likely to develop social anxiety disorder. And we know this partly because people who aren't even raised in the same household as their relatives will develop it. The other aspect is learning. So who you grow up with can make a difference. Caregivers can teach their children to be socially anxious. If you have a caregiver who is actively communicating that social situations are dangerous, that the child can't cope in a social situation, that the child needs escape or needs safety behaviors or reassurance, then the child can learn through that social situations aren't safe. Another learning experience is just having negative social experiences. This comes to, we all have negative social experiences, but this harkens back to the chart we were just looking at. Partly, how do you cognitively interpret these? Somebody who says, hey, yeah, I tripped and I fell and people laughed and, hey, that was great to, hear that laughter. They are not likely to be feeling socially anxious in that situation. Whereas somebody else who has a pattern of thinking and behavior that is more likely to reinforce the anxiety and reinforce that social situations are dangerous can over time go from being shy and anxious here and there to clinically having social anxiety disorder.
That's a good thing to think about. I feel like there are more people now with social anxiety disorder than there were maybe 20, 30 years ago. And maybe it's just that I was unaware, but I'm wondering, how do you feel living in the social media age has an effect on social anxiety disorder?
I think that's an interesting question. There's not been a genetic change over the few years that we've had the technology and the social media. But I think that technology sets up a way for us to learn that it can be safer to not have that direct contact. So I think something I hear a lot of people say is they don't like the telephone. They would rather send a text message. And before we had texting, if you wanted information from somebody, if you wanted to give somebody information, you had to do that directly, whether that was by telephone or face-to-face. I mean, certainly people did write letters, but so lacking that direct conversation, direct contact, you just lack the experiences, the exposure to doing things directly. In terms of whether social media is helpful or causing more social anxiety disorder, I think it really depends on the person. Some people who have been terribly, terribly anxious and isolated have been able to find a social life through social media, and they don't have to feel alone anymore. Sometimes we use social media as a starting point. Can you post hello to somebody? Can you friend somebody that you used to know in high school? Can you say your opinion about something? But we use that as a starting point to reaching out to the wider world. Social media can also be a way that people just avoid So instead of going out, seeing people, being around people, social media does become a way that they can avoid and isolate, and then we would see greater impairment.
Thank you. That's good to see both sides of the coin there. I know sometimes social media gets a bad rap, but when you said it, it provides a safety place for someone to start exploring being more social, that's a good thing. This disorder can be selective, so some people may have an intense fear of a single circumstance, such as talking to a salesperson or making a phone call, but they can be perfectly comfortable in other social settings, performing in front of an audience. While other people may become anxious in routine activities in which they are being observed, like talking to a stranger or an authority figure, participating in meetings or classes, even attending parties or dating. And still, some people may have performance form of anxiety disorder that gives them an intense fear of giving a presentation or performing in a concert on a stage or a sporting event even. How, However, they may be more quite comfortable in other social situations. Nora, how can a person know when what they're experiencing is just a byproduct of being an introvert and naturally shy, or when it is something more serious?
Well, as you've said, we look at how much social discomfort a person is feeling, how consistent this is, and how much time they've been experiencing this, and how much it interferes in their life. So in mental health, we're always looking at symptoms in terms of how do they affect a person's functioning. Um, if you go out and you're kind of slow to warm up to talking to somebody, but otherwise you're okay, then you're probably just shy. It's more serious if it really prevents you from meeting your life goals. If you're not taking on projects at work because it's going to involve more social interaction, if you're not going and doing things socially, maybe starting a hobby that you want to learn because it's going to involve being in front of people, possibly being judged by people. It can also, you had mentioned at the beginning, shame. If you're feeling shame about the impact this is having on your family, maybe you're feeling bad that you don't take your kids anywhere and they're seeing how afraid you are. That has a tremendous impact in how you feel about yourself. And also, if you find yourself getting anxious in more and more situations, that's when we would start looking at a diagnosis of social anxiety disorder if those things were present.
That's good to know. So, psychologist David Moskovich from the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada, he proposed a new understanding of social anxiety. He suggests that instead of trying to categorize a social anxiety based on the type of situation that a person fears, that it makes more sense to divide the fears into 4 different types of social anxiety based on the fears themselves. You, with social anxiety, you're afraid that there's some fatal flaw about yourself that will be revealed to other people. And in this way, it's not the situation itself that you fear as much as what will happen if that fatal flaw is revealed in such a grand catastrophe that makes you look weird or stupid and could impact your future in an irreconcilable way. The 4 areas of fatal flaws that David identified are the flaws in your social skills, fear about your anxiety symptoms becoming obvious to others. We talked about that in the cycle earlier. Flaws in your physical appearance, and flaws in your personality or character. Well, it's not easy or a quick process to overcome these fears because they center around a core belief you have about yourself that is going to take some time to change. However, it is possible, and one way to overcoming your anxiety is to allow your perceived flaws and fears to show and just be prepared to accept the outcome, whatever it is, good or bad. And knowing how difficult this may be, Nora, what is one small thing that a person can do to start changing those thought patterns?
Well, really, just becoming aware of them to start with is the best first step. Sometimes they are so automatic, so ingrained that we don't step back and say, hey, yeah, this is a pattern of thinking which is leading me to be anxious. And then as you're aware of this problem, you can start catching yourself. And when you catch yourself, then you can ask, is this thought, is this way of thinking really helping me live the life that I want to live? Most of the time, the answer is no. And then you can proceed to start making adjustments in your thinking and your behavior and to start changing your life.
That's good. I know this one really hit home for me because in my early 20s, I don't know if it was diagnosed or not, but there are many situations where I had that fear of that, this fatal flaw about myself would be revealed. And it really hit home. It's not the same as just being an introvert for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, whether you're going to categorize it by the type of situation or by the type of fear, these extreme fears can manifest themselves in three different ways. You can have physical symptoms, you can have cognitive symptoms, and behavioral symptoms. For some people, these symptoms may become so severe that they escalate into a full-blown panic attack. However, unlike those who have panic disorder, people with social anxiety disorder know that their panic is provoked by the fears of the social and performance related situations rather than the fear about the panic attack themselves. Physical symptoms are often beyond their control. They may affect their circulatory system, their heart rate, their breathing, their digestive system, their vision, their sweat glands, things that are beyond their control. Some of the cognitive symptoms involve dysfunctional thought patterns, and people with this condition are bothered by negative thoughts and self-doubt when it comes to social and performance-related situations. And behavioral symptoms can cause people to act in certain ways. They tend to make choices based on fear and avoidance rather than their actual preferences and desires and ambitions. What are some of the common symptoms that people should learn to recognize, Nora?
Well, I think behaviorally speaking, avoidance is really the big one. Um, Children will avoid school, will avoid after school activities, parties. Adults will avoid social situations, gatherings, hobbies, anything in which they're going to think that they might be feeling highly anxious or panicked. Cognitively, we talk about cognitive distortions, and there's many different cognitive distortions, but a couple of common ones in social anxiety, something we call fortune telling. That is thinking ahead to this social situation and thinking about all the bad things that are going to happen. And of course, reacting to that as if you do have a crystal ball, as if this is true. And then another one is catastrophizing. And that's where a negative thing is an awful thing, and an awful thing is a disaster, and you can't cope with the disaster. And so, you feel like this is just going to be completely out of your control. And often those two things go together. So you might have a person who is afraid that they're going to trip over their words in a presentation, and they conclude that tripping over the words is an awful thing. People would judge them for that they're incapable and incompetent. And being judged that way is just going to be something they can't deal with. So that would lead them to be very anxious in that situation or refuse to be in that situation in the first place. In terms of panic attacks, those symptoms are out of your control because that is your body's hardwired system for dealing with threats. We call it the fight or flight. And people get short of breath, their heart beats fast, they feel dizzy, they can feel tingly. And all of that has to do with your body getting itself ready to fight the danger or to run away from it. So something like feeling nauseous happens because your body doesn't need to digest food while you're in fight or flight. And so it redirects resources away from that, and that can make you feel nauseous. Your body needs lots of oxygen and blood going everywhere. So your breathing changes and your heart rate changes. And that's something that, again, with time, if you just leave it alone, if you don't fear those symptoms, it fades. Your body re-regulates itself.
Awesome. That's good to know that you can you can come out of that and your body does re-regulate. Because when you're in the moment, it often feels like sometimes like you're going to die.
Yeah, and the more you fight it, the more you feel like you're going to die. And really, if you don't fear it, if you accept it, if you say, "This is my body doing what it was built to do," it and just notice it fades.
So comorbidities or concurrently existing disorders are common for those with social anxiety, occurring in as many as 90% of patients who have social anxiety disorder. The presence of comorbidities may affect the course of the disease in several ways in which they increase the symptom severity, the treatment resistance, and decreased functioning, as well as sometimes making it even more difficult to diagnose. People with social anxiety disorder are at an increased risk for depression, substance use disorder, eating disorders, and even suicide attempts, even more so than people who have other social anxiety or other anxiety disorders. Sorry. Can you talk a little bit about how comorbidity affects social anxiety disorder?
Yes, well, obviously, different disorder combinations are going to present different challenges for the person and for the therapist. I can think of one example that's a good one, which is social anxiety and substance abuse. Say you have somebody who has social anxiety and they drink to relax. And then over time, they start to rely on having a drink in social situations or performance situations. And then they hit a point where they can't have the alcohol. Maybe it's a work presentation or they're at just a no alcohol party or something. And suddenly that anxiety seems really huge and really something like they can't control. They're used to having the alcohol as a coping mechanism. And then, of course, that reinforces that anxiety they feel, reinforces that they really do need the alcohol to cope. And there really is something to be anxious about. Another aspect of this is I've talked to a lot of people who are wanting to stop drinking or they've recently stopped drinking, and they really worry about the social judgment of refusing a drink if they are out. In their experience, drinking is normal, and so refusing the drink is going to call attention to themselves, and that again is going to lead to possible judgment. And so that judgment of being sober is a really powerful one. And often people think that they're limited to two choices, either being sober and alone or being social and being a drinker. And so part of therapy would be helping them see that there are more options than just those two things. And it would be helping to untangle what aspects are alcohol abuse related and what aspects are social anxiety disorder related.
Awesome. Yeah. That's a good point. Even the mommy wine culture, we've got mugs and t-shirts and bags and everything that has that on there. It's such a popular thing in our society.
Yes, very much so.
Overall, studies show that cognitive behavioral therapy and medication are about equally effective. However, research shows that while medication works faster, cognitive behavioral therapy offers longer lasting benefits. This type of treatment actively involves people changing the way they perceive the situations they're involved in and the events in their lives to help them develop skills and better cope with anxiety. Can you tell us a little bit more about cognitive behavioral therapy and what's involved and how it works to overcome social anxiety disorder?
Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy is based on the theory that thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all interconnected. We can't tell ourselves what to feel. I can't sit here and say, be angry, Nora, be happy, and just create that emotion. Um, it's really our thoughts that influence that. But we can change our thoughts and our behaviors. And as we change our thoughts and our behaviors, that has influence on our emotions. And and so in cognitive behavioral therapy, your therapist is going to help you identify the thoughts that you have, which are pushing and maintaining the social anxiety. You're going to work on seeing, are these thoughts realistic? Are they rational? Are they sensible and grounded in reality? And how can we change them? How can we be more objective? And then you're going to take those thoughts and you're going to put them into practice in social situations. So the practice is a really vital component of doing therapy for social anxiety, because again, it goes back to that learning component. You need to expose yourself over and over and see that, yes, you can have a variety of social experiences. You can even be judged, you can even be rejected, and ultimately be okay. I think that, I can use myself as an example of how CBT works. I had definitely had the cognitive distortions I talked about earlier, the fortune telling and the catastrophizing. I would also be very focused on my own anxiety, my own bodily sensations, and very focused on escaping, either mentally trying to be someplace else in my head, or how can I, get out of this room or out of this situation. And so cognitively in therapy, my task was really to accept that judgment by other people was not a catastrophe, and to learn to not jump into doing the fortune telling and all that assuming and prejudging what might happen if something bad happened, or any of that. Behaviorally, my task was to practice, and to ultimately be open to the fact that, yeah, I might mess up, but I can be okay. And I think for me, one thing was I used to be really afraid of blushing in front of people. And the more I focused on how hot my face felt and how red it probably was, of course, I didn't have a mirror in front of me, but I was sure that I was purple, the more miserable I would get. And I had to work on, first of all, looking around the room. I had never looked at other people before, and I realized, yeah, other people, their faces flush while they talk. People get sweaty. People have all kinds of things happen to them, and they're okay. And also, people don't really pay attention to begin with. So that was really instrumental for me in changing my thinking and my behaving.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. That's really a great story of hope, knowing that you yourself experienced social anxiety disorder, but now you're, leading a successful professional life, and you're doing the things you want to do, and that's really a story of hope. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I encourage anybody. I mean, I'm not finished by any means, but I certainly think things are a lot more manageable than they used to be. And I think with social anxiety disorder, you start feeling kind of stuck, that you're just not going to be able to handle things in life. And that can be really depressing and disabling. And I just want people to know that it doesn't have to be that way.
Awesome. Aside from therapy with a trained counselor or a licensed therapist. Self-help might incorporate some aspects of relaxation, thought reprogramming, exposure to feared situations. As with any mental health condition, we always want to start with our physical health. So exercise, good nutrition, adequate sleep, avoiding those alcohol and other substances that we talked about, staying up to date on current events so you can make small talk. If a person doesn't have access to a counselor or a therapist, maybe they can't afford it, or maybe they're just in a rural area, or maybe they're just not ready to make that call. What are some self-help strategies that can start a person on the road to recovery?
Well, it sounds counterintuitive, but really having the willingness to approach the thing that's making you anxious is the key for treating all anxiety disorders. Our instinct is to avoid, to run away, but opening yourself up to having this experience, being curious about it. The work you do with a therapist is all about exposure, and you don't have to have a therapist to start working on exposure for yourself. You can really think about it as setting up little experiments. Start small. Think about small things that make you anxious and figure out how you can put yourself in that situation and practice over and over. I think stores are a great place to practice social skills in. So find a store that you're comfortable enough in. You don't have to love the place. Again, that's part of being willing. But comfortable enough in, and maybe you find that it's hard for you to make eye contact with people. So you say, what would happen if I make eye contact with the first 10 people that I see, or I try to make eye contact with them? You know, notice what is going on when you do that in yourself, in the other people. Notice that you, even though you were uncomfortable with it, you did it, you made it through it, and do it again and again and again. And, there's all kinds of little things that you can do. It may be smiling at people. It may be saying hi to somebody, or striking up a conversation while you're picking out apples, or striking up a little conversation with the cashier and asking him or her how their day has been. If you want to do something that is a little more stressful, gets a little more to the heart of that sense of being judged, you can walk into the store with a silly hat on, or a shirt you would never be seen in a million years with out and about. Also, just notice other people that that they're not acting perfectly either. And maybe you have a passing thought that somebody is a little strange, but overall, you forget about it. It's just kind of a moot point. We're people. We all have our shortcomings, and we all make mistakes, and that's just part of being human. So that's where I would start.
That's awesome. I love the idea of wearing an outlandish hat to the store. That's great. You can draw attention to yourself and know that you can get back to your car safely, and nothing terrible is going to happen with that.
Yeah, and it's amazing, really, how few people are actually even going to look at you. Or you could wear a big feather boa, or just something, and yeah. And I suppose it depends on where you live, but
Right.
how much attention you get. But even if you get attention, is it always negative attention?
Right.
It's not.
I love the idea of just approaching it from a standpoint of curiosity and setting up little experiments for yourself. I think that's great.
Mhm.
You know, if it's not properly managed, if we've talked about how great it can be when you do properly manage it and treat it. But if it's not properly managed, social anxiety disorder can be economically devastating for some people because they can have difficulty completing school or college, interviewing for and getting a job, networking, building professional relationships. One strategy for success may be in choosing the type of work that you do and following something that you're really passionate about, and not only the type of work that you do, that you're comfortable in, but choosing the role in the team that best suits you. Everyone has a different role to play, but they still may be working on the same overall cause. Another good thing to keep in mind is leaders and managers and even human resource professionals can implement a number of strategies to alleviate stress and reduce social anxiety for workers. And the good thing about this is these strategies can also improve the overall workplace satisfaction and happiness for everyone, not just people who have anxiety. So they're just good practices to incorporate in general. And one of those is having an open door policy. If you're a manager or a leader, you should be approachable so employees with social anxiety can feel confident coming to you with questions or concerns. Maybe make multiple channels of communication available that might make anxious employees more comfortable, such as email or chat applications. Set realistic expectations. Leaders should set goals that are attainable goals and engage employees in the goal setting process. And consider the individual's personal styles in their when they're setting goals and considering that. Some people prefer single assignments over multitasking. Some people prefer eating at their desk instead of in the break room. Creating a positive work environment. Employees with or without social anxiety should always feel safe in their workspace. Leaders should work to establish supportive relationships and frame feedback in any positive light. And always make social gatherings encouraged, but don't make them mandatory for your employees. And it's great to offer wellness benefits, whether that is an employee assistance program or possibly searching out for insurance plans that support wellness benefits, health benefits, counseling services, even yoga classes or meditation. And last but not least, it's good for employers to champion their employees, especially if an employee takes a risk and discloses that they have social anxiety, or even if the condition is just suspected by the interactions. Managers can act as champions for the individuals and encourage them, if public speaking is an issue, to join a group like Toastmasters, or give them, a small rehearsed portion of a presentation so that they can grow used to standing in front of a crowd. But just work with them in the goal setting. Now, how do you start, if you're in the workplace, how do you start a conversation with your supervisor about social anxiety disorder?
Well, I think that's a good question because many people have concerns about how they talk to their employer and coworkers about mental health issues. Um, I think a great place to start is before you have the conversation. Really think about what's the purpose of this conversation? What do you want to get out of it? And that helps you consider what you would share with your employer and what they may not need to know. And I would say focus on your work performance and work goals. Supervisors are usually receptive to things that are focused around that. I can imagine a conversation in which you said, hey, supervisor, I really noticed that my performance reviews are kind of low in the area of customer service skills. And I'm wanting to improve that. I want you to know that this is a hard area for me because I get really nervous talking to customers. And I'm hoping that you'll support me as I try to challenge myself some more. And maybe we could come up with some ways that I can ease into this. One thing I don't recommend, I guess, because I'm a therapist and I'm an exposure therapist, is asking your supervisor to just flat out avoid any duties that cause you some social anxiety. I would say, can you modify those? Can you reduce them and, add them back in as you build your skills with whatever it is that you're working on?
If a person doesn't feel they have a supportive workplace or a supportive boss, what are some strategies that they can incorporate into their working style to help them out?
Well, I would say that there may be somebody else, one of your coworkers, who can be a support for you, or a friend or family member who you can kind of bounce ideas off of about what you're going to try and how it's going. I would also say look into if you have EAP benefits. A lot of employers, part of your benefits are 3 to 8 free sessions with a counselor who can just help you talk through these and come up with some ideas. Go back to the idea of the little experiments. Choose a goal for yourself and break it down. Maybe it's giving a presentation. Well, start by saying a sentence at the next meeting and work up from there. You can also find ways to practice these skills outside of work where there might be less pressure. You might feel a little safer. And also just remember that even little things you do help. You don't have to be perfect, and perfection is often a source of feeling socially anxious. So just accept that you're human again.
Awesome. And you talked a little bit about having, those family or friends or coworkers that you can run things by. For social anxiety disorder, having a good support system of trusted people that understand the challenges of having this condition is very important. People in your support system can notice when you're not acting or feeling like yourself and help you cope when you're having a rough time. They will be there for you when you need them and remind you that you're not alone. And sometimes just that, just being present is the greatest gift. They can listen non-judgmentally when you need to someone to talk to, and give honest and helpful information and feedback when you need it. And they can encourage you in those little experiments that Nora talked about, encourage you to help face your fears and resist avoiding situations that cause anxiety. Now, how do you talk to another person about your social anxiety disorder? Maybe it's a new acquaintance, or maybe it's someone you've known a long time. It can be difficult to ask for help or support. And what is the best way to say, hey, I need a little help here?
Well, I think such as when you're talking to a supervisor, consider, why am I sharing? Sometimes we want to share because we're seeking support. Sometimes we feel like we owe people an explanation, and that may get back to those symptoms of social anxiety in which you're thinking you're being judged. So I would say consider that, but let's say it's because you want support. Really framing it for yourself as, this conversation is my choice. It's something I'm doing for myself because I'm wanting to let somebody into my life about this. I'm wanting support with this. Often clients I talk to feel like talking about a mental health issue with another person is going to be a really complicated conversation, and that there's things they have to tell and that there's a right way to tell it. It is not complicated. Really, the best way to approach it is simple and factual. Just something like, there's times that I feel terrified in social situations, and I wanted you to know because I really need somebody to talk to about it. Can be all you have to say.
That's awesome. We talk about our support system, and how does a support system differ from a support group?
Well, a support group is an organized group of people who all have the same issues. So they would all have social anxiety. They come together in person or virtually, and they share their challenges that they've had, their stories. They share their treatment that they're pursuing, successes that they have, and they're just there for mutual support and understanding. A support system is really anybody in your life who supports you. It could be parents, teachers, clergy, coworkers, your neighbor. It could even be your regular cashier at the store who you just enjoy getting a smile from. They can be somebody who's close or not close, somebody that you go to about social anxiety or about other things. All of us need support systems, and really all of us are part of somebody else's support system.
Awesome. Those are important things to remember. We are sharing on the screen some resources. Feel free to take a picture of them if you want. We'll also have a recording up for this on our YouTube page, and we'll also share it on our Facebook. But there are some resources that we have. And if anybody has any questions, we've talked about a lot of different things. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. My producer, Eva, is going to put this link. We have just a really short 5-question survey. It'll take you like, less than a minute probably to fill out and just give us some feedback about today's presentation of the Mental Health Matters Forum. We want to make this impactful for the community that we serve and make it relevant to you all in your life. So just if you would just take a few minutes, Eva, like I said, we'll put that survey link in the chat. Click on it. It takes about, like I said, probably less than a minute. There's just five really simple questions. The other things we wanted to share with you before we let you go today is SC Thrive has certified mental health first aid instructors. So we offer at no cost, thanks to the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Foundation, we are able to offer adult and youth certification for mental health first aid at no cost to the participant. And if you visit this link here, you can go to the register for our classes. You can also reach it through our website at scthrive.org. Right now, we're offering them all virtually because of COVID. So what that involves is a 2-hour pre-work session followed by a 6-hour live in-person session. But the great thing about it is you come away with a nationally recognized 3-year certification in mental health first aid from the National Council of Behavioral Health. And the youth class, it's important to note, is for adults or parents who work with youth and not the youth themselves. There is a teen certification, but we do not offer that here at SC Thrive. But we hope that you'll join us. Like I said, those are greatly available. Thanks to the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Foundation, those are available at no cost. The other thing I wanted to share with you, whoops, slides got away with me, is we have our annual training where we offer a variety of topics. This year, we are going to be focusing on unraveling the social determinants of health. This will be September 27th and 28th. We are fingers crossed, hoping that COVID will be at a point where we can have it in person in Charleston, South Carolina. If not, we will have it virtually as we did last year. These are some of our sponsors that we have, some of our sponsoring organizations that help us to do the work that we do here at SC Thrive, and we always like to give a nod to them. We hope that you will connect with us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and we hope that you will join us and connect with us. Like I said, this recording will be available to you, and we hope to see you next time. Next month, the first Friday of March, on the 5th of March, we will be talking about bullying in the workplace. So thank you, and I hope you all have a great day.